Well, hello everyone, and welcome to New Oroperu Resources Live Investment Summit today, hosted by Six. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have President Wayne Livingstone and Vice President Corporate Development Christina McCarthy. Wayne and Christina will walk us through a company presentation, and then we will be accepting questions live. So you can submit your questions at any time on the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And as always, the summit is being recorded and available to watch afterwards on Six.com. Also, a copy of this presentation is available for downloads under the Handouts tab on the right-hand side of your screen. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Christina, to kick things off.
Thanks, Dasha, and thanks for hosting this event today. My name's Christina McCarthy. I'm a geologist by background, spent some time in Scandinavia, a couple of years working on exploration projects. I've been in the capital markets for nearly 12 years now, working in various roles such as institutional sales, research at an EMD, and spent about 5 of the last 6 years as Director of Corporate Development for McEwen Mining. I've since joined Oroperu, thought this was an exceptional opportunity and loved this project that we have here in Peru. Wayne was very instrumental in getting this project. He was the actual geologist that made the discovery and negotiated the project, as well as negotiated an option we had with Barrick. So I'll hand it over to Wayne, let him give a quick brief background of himself. He'll go over the presentation. He'll hand it back to me, and then I will discuss sort of the lay of the land on where we are moving forward, and we'll take questions from there. I'll hand it over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, Christina. My background, I'm a geologist by training, and I've been involved in the business since the late 60s. I've been involved in the finding and construction of a heap leach operation in Nevada, and various discoveries. The Oroperu project was a grassroots project that we found in 1995, doing regional work in Peru at a time when the markets were interested in all these foreign countries. And from that early discovery, we've had several rounds of drilling, which have moved this project forward. I've been following it intimately since those discoveries, and brought the company up to where we are now. I think that's the main element in the background here that's important to Oroperu. Perhaps we could just start with the slides. The management and board, I've had Aris as CFO, Aris Mafopoulos, and Maynard and Brown, Jim Carhilton, that were founding directors with me and early on, and are still an important part of the company. Next slide. The important part of the project is driven by its location. In part, it's a very accessible part of Peru. It's in a belt of rocks that's hosted some pretty giant deposits. Yanacocha, in excess of 37 million ounces produced. Purina is about an 8 million ouncer. Lagunas Norte, which is just north of us, about 12 kilometers, has produced 10 million ounces. It's got another 4 or so in the resources. We have 2.5 and growing. So this belt of rocks does host a lot of good-sized deposits. For now, we have done recently upgraded our resources. We have 2.5 million ounces indicated. Not a lot in the inferred. It's fairly well drilled. It includes about 630 ounces of leachable resources, which are basically sitting just right on top of the sulfides. Fairly low strip ratio to get at these leachable sulfides, leachable oxides, about 2 to 1. although the resources at the moment are pitch constrained, 100% pitch constrained, there is plenty of opportunity to expand the resources. Many holes are bottomed in mineralization, and there's lots of potential for drilling deeper. We'll get into that a little later in the slide. The element here is that in the the optionality of the project is important in that we've got a heap leachable resource as a starter pit, and that's very important to the development of this project. It's sitting right on top of the sulfides, which will be a natural sequence to evolve into developing those. We now own 100% of this project. Prior to December 31st last year, it was under option to Barrick, and we'll speak to that element a little later. But Barrick has subsequently sold their Lagunas Norte project. Okay, next slide, please. In the capitalization here, you can see Pan American Silver owns a fair slug of the company. Management directors, about 12%, and I own the majority of that. The market cap at the moment is about 51 million. Pan American's role in this should be explained. During the discovery moments, the adjacent ground to where I found the mineralization was held by Pan American, who are operating next door. We then made a 50-50 joint venture arrangement with Pan American to explore the area. Subsequently, Pan American rolled their interest into New Oroperu for shares and retained a 1.5% royalty. So that's the origin of Pan American's ownership in Peru, in New Oroperu. Okay, next slide. Location-wise, it's fairly well located. The inset there, we fly north from Lima to Trujillo. Lima's an international airport. From Trujillo to the project, right through to Huamachuco, is a paved road. The Tres Cruces project is about 3 kilometers just south of the paved road. Good access. Okay, next slide. So we get a little closer to the project here now, where you can see the Lagunas Norte development has a fairly extensive development of their open pit. You see the heap leaches in their pit. The Tres Cruces mineralized outline is shown at the bottom of the inset there. Between the two projects is an airstrip that Barrick has used during their operations there. It's 100% owned. We have 2.5 million ounces at 1.65 grams in the indicated category, and the 630 ounces of leachable gold resources. 425 of that is oxide at 1.37 grams, which is a fairly good grade and has fairly good recovery, which we will get into in a bit. The geology and mineralization in this belt of Eocene Pliocene rocks hosting these big deposits is, I spoke to that earlier. It's just a good setting. The view that we see in the oxides is that that's really going to provide near-term cash flow for any operation that we start generating here. So it'll be the first step. Okay, next slide. The geology here is tertiary volcanics. It's the mineralization is hosted in some andesitic rocks, capped with some rhyolite that you see here in orange. You can see the outline in red of the sulfide pit, and all the oxides are basically contained, within the sulfide pit. So it's an easy mining process from top down. Okay, next slide. This basically is a table here showing the breakdown of the mineralization. So you've got your oxides, 9.6 million tons of 1.37 for 425,000 ounces of oxide, followed by 205,000 of leachable sulfide sitting immediately underneath it. And then underneath all of that is our sulfide deposit of 1.8 million ounces of 1.84 grams. Next slide. In the metallurgical side, there's been a fair bit of work done on column leach test works by prior operator prior to Barrick, and that basically established a fairly good recovery. The average of the column test was 81.7% recovery, which we use in the resource. Most of the direct cyanide leach and CIL tests were north of 85%. So I think our 82% recovery is probably conservative. The heap leachable sulfides immediately sitting underneath it, we use a 65% recovery based on direct cyanide leach and CIL testing. The rest of the sulfides are not well defined. There's quite a wide range of cyanide solubility. Some direct cyanide solubility of the sulfides can give you recovery as much as 90%, but there's also a component of it that's very refractory. So there's a fair bit of work that's going to have to be done in the metallurgical side of the sulfides in order to fine tune it. But we fully expect that some of that sulfide can be treated by a method a little less expensive than POX. But for purpose of this resource, we used the expensive processing and the 88% gold recovery that would go with it. 88 was sort of a nominal number selected. Most of the tests were 90% plus. In the metallurgical work that we've done to date, there's been silver is reporting. Unfortunately, the deposit itself, while it was under the control of their operators, was not completely assayed for silver. So we do have an indication that shows up in the metallurgical work. We do speak to it in our 43-101. Feel that there's probably 3 to 5 million ounces recoverable of silver. I think one of the things that we'll do is look a little harder at silver once we take control of this project and move it forward. So the other element that we have to keep in mind is in looking at Tres Cruces as a total developed scenario is that it is sitting adjacent to the Lagunas Norte deposit. It's only 12 kilometers away. There may well be some synergies between these two projects. We don't know exactly how that's all going to work out. We'll speak to that a little later in the slide, but the contemplated development of Lagunas is a pressure oxidation system. So that may be a consideration in the future. Okay, next slide. This is a little more of the same. You can see our property boundary there, showing the Barrick ground to the north and immediately to the east of us, and the outline of the sulfide and oxide pits. And the density of drilling is all these black dots. Okay, next. This sort of sets up some sections that we're going to look at next. The section 2440 and 1990 are designed to show the elements in the oxide pit, and the section 101 and 124 will give you a cross section of the long section of the overall pit. Okay, next slide, please. So here's one of our oxide sections. The blue line in there is the line of the oxide pit and our resources, and we've shown the grade distribution immediately below the oxides. There is a geological control to the oxide mineralization, and it's generally at the base of a rhyolite in contact with the andesite. So you see the orange over the green there. That's the contact, and that tends to control the distribution of oxide mineralization. Okay, next slide. This another slide a little further south from the other one. Again, you see some fairly good grade right at the contact between the andesite and the rhyolite, and then you see some of the distribution of sulfide grades below the oxides. Next slide. This is the overall picture of again a cross section looking northeast. You can see the thin red line on top there. That's the base of oxides, and then the sort of bluish line immediately under it is the veneer of leachable sulfides immediately underneath the oxides, and then the bulk of the mineralization, as you see, is sulfide, and there's sections of the mineralization that do penetrate below the pit, and that'll be for future exploration or future expansion. Okay, next. This is a long section showing the same elements. The oxide sitting on top, leachable, skinny layer of leachable sulfides immediately underneath, sitting on top of the oxides. We show the boundary between Barrick and New Oroperu over on the right-hand side of this slide. There is more mineralization that would be captured if we could move the pit over onto Barrick's ground. So that's a future discussion. Next. This really just points out a bunch of drill holes that have bottomed in mineralization, and it just shows the strong intervals and at the bottom of holes and the various grades. So you can see some of them are fairly good grades. You know, that 11 grammer stands out, and another one at 5 grams. But and there's a lot of these drill holes, of course, can be deepened to expand resources at depth. They would mainly be sulfide resources. Okay, next. Again, these are various drill holes that show good grade. I think you can read these on the website. I don't need to speak to each of them. Okay, next. This is a cutoff sensitivity for the resources. The 0.3 cutoff is used for the heap leachable resources. That's probably a pretty conservative cutoff, but you see it, even if you dropped it down to 0.2, it doesn't really add a lot of ounces to the thing. And it's because the oxides are fairly well defined currently, and the transition between the oxide and the heap leachable sulfides is fairly sharp. In the sulfide resources, though, we are indicating a fairly expensive way to process them with POX, and we're using a 0.9 cutoff. You do add additional ounces by lowering your cutoff, and So that's the purpose of this chart here. Okay, next. This is the important part of the whole deposit. For now, we would like to advance the oxides and take those into production as quickly as practically possible. And with fairly good grade, there's a few drill holes here that have some exceptional grade. But I think the important thing to see from this is that it's going to provide the near-term cash flow to develop, the immediately underneath the underlying sulfides. So it just provides the logical expansion into the sulfides. If it was ever contemplated to deal with these oxides at Lagunas, Lagunas at the moment has a big heap leach that's just leaching in care and maintenance because of lack of oxide material. This could be a candidate. We don't know whether that's real or not, but our intention is to develop it one way or another. Okay, next. This is sort of a part of the analytical side of the talk, and perhaps Christina, would you like to take over at this stage?
Sure thing. So as Wayne mentioned, so I joined the company back in May 2020, and predicting sort of all outcomes with Barrick and how this could all play out. They were our partner managing the project for the last 17 years, and predicting any scenario that, not knowing could they possibly earn into the 70% of the project. They potentially could walk away from Lagunas, monetize it, then we would get the project back 100%. Or, we could even be taken out by a third party before then. So in predicting all of those scenarios in this last year, and since I've joined, we have been canvassing the market, speaking with various corporates and various private equity partners, various operating teams that could help really, take this through towards a production scenario. And, we now know that, really since January now, we've been able to have a clear outcome on a more clear outcome on what the future looks like. Barrick has not exercised the option, and they let it expire this past December 31st. So we now have 100% of Tres Cruces back for the first time since January 1st of this year. That to us was, a very exciting scenario to own it 100%. So, what does that look like now for us? Well, now we own 100% of an open pitable 2.474 million ounce resource, which is at 1.66 grams per ton, top 3 highest grade oxide development projects in the world. And with all the infrastructure around us, and including a large potential for exploration and mineralization at depth. We've barely touched the surface here on exploration and what's feeding the near surface mineralization. You can kind of see again from those sections where most of that mineralization lays, and that some of those holes pierce right through the bottom of the pit and continue in gold mineralization. So, essentially what that looks like now for us, that we have this project back 100%, it will be sort of a two-phase process. The first phase would be to develop the low capex oxide heap leach part of the scenario. We believe that around a $700 per ounce cost is a reasonable when you compare it to peers, and around a 70 to 100 million US capex. If we were using $1,700 gold and $1,000 margins on that, given that I'm talking about a $700 per ounce cost, well, that if I were to only look at the oxide component alone, which is your low hanging fruit, and again that oxide, just if I'm only looking at the oxide, which is 425,000 ounces, well, that could add up to some $400 and 25 million of net pre-tax cash flow. So that's a pretty significant piece there to then, start phase 2, which will be the sulfide development. So, the sulfide development being immediately funded by that free cash flow accumulated from that early oxide development. It's a pretty nice offset there. And I'll also point out that, we haven't even explored the silver component in the deposit, and there could be 5 to 10% value attributed to the silver alone. So, going from there and looking at all the various opportunities, we see, again, we're ranked, top 3 highest grade oxide development projects in the world. In the camp, there's no other oxide ounces that have been drilled to this degree of confidence as those at Tres Cruces. So we become, a pretty important piece to the puzzle. If anyone in the camp wants to restart and use our oxide ounces to potentially offset our own sort of standalone asset, if we want to develop this on our own, 630,000 ounces of leachable gold ounces is a pretty nice way to start, as a standalone. We believe it has a lot of merit in being a standalone asset. Again, if we are looking at opportunities to add additional both leachable ounces, sulfide and oxide. There's the mineralization that is below the pit. That's where the exploration upside really lays for us. Gold was around $800 an ounce when this project was last drilled back in 2008. So, a lot of potential here to develop this through to, expand on the current resources, and also develop it towards a production decision. Given the 600,000 ounces of leachable sulfide and not even really counting the other potential that's there, I think this, we believe this has a lot of merit in being a standalone asset and could really just, we could be a sitting duck at this point, given that we've now owned this 100% and we've de-risked the story for a lot of folks out there that are, look like a mid-tier company that are looking to bolt on another small cap producer or diversify jurisdictions. So in that respect, we have de-risked the story in that sense and could be a takeout target for most at this point. While that's all, great news and all, we still are continuing to move the project ahead. We have been having, discussions with various consulting groups to improve the economics and metallurgy on our project. And we will continue those discussions and also operating teams because, it is a small group that we have here right now, and we will need to expand on the current group that we have and, bring this through to, putting some economics on the project. I think it makes sense first, and we haven't obviously decided this yet, but it would make sense first to focus on that 630,000 ounces of leachable material, given that it is sort of the low-hanging fruit, and, expand upon there. So during all that, we will continue to explore M&A opportunities for Tres Cruces and, to create shareholder value. I'll turn it over to you, Dasha. If we have some questions that folks maybe want to ask.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So this is a good time to jump into Q&A. To kick things off, I was wondering if you could talk more about Barrick and why they chose not to purchase Tres Cruces.
Yeah, of course. So Mark Bristow has been pretty clear in his focus of capital and, acquiring assets that are those tier 1 assets. And they are typically in the order of 500,000 ounces to 1 million ounces of production a year. Tres Cruces and Lagunas combined has resources of just under 8 million, according to all the public documents. And, that still just does not check the box for them. It's a drop in the bucket. It's something, while it's, not big enough for Barrick, well, it's plenty large enough for, a small cap producer, as I just mentioned, or a mid-tier or a single asset company to diversify development and production scenarios. So, in that regard, I think that, any company can, scoop this up and it'd be a great addition from, major sort of purging projects that are just too small for them. Many companies have become quite successful because of majors monetizing the smaller non-core assets, right?
Great, yeah. Thank you. Paul has a question here. He's asking, with the Barrick option exercise now behind you, where does permitting stand now? And can you comment on the current COVID impact on field work at the present situation as well?
Yeah, with respect to the COVID, it slows things down. Although the country is permitting, mining folks to travel. There's still the real element of how much you can really try to achieve, but mining is still active in Peru. And I think as far as moving the project forward and getting permits, we're in process of dealing with final termination documents to get that all in place. Once we have that done, then of course we can start applying for permits, which we will do. So we see the permitting process for expanding on drilling, obtaining more metallurgical drill holes and geotechnical holes as required. Sort of step one. We see at the same time moving this thing forward towards feasibility and doing all the necessary steps for that.
Great. Thank you. What is your current cash position, and will you need to raise money in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, we have about 1.7 million in the bank right now. And, as I discussed, we will be looking to put some economics on the 630,000 ounces of leachable material that we have just announced in the press release back. We filed it on March 17th, actually. So very recent news, hot off the press. And so for us, the next step would be to take those ounces and put some economics on that. We'll have to hire some folks to do that, some consulting folks, some metallurgists to tweak that as well, and to also, the main thing is, some project managers and operating guys to really look into this and take this through to the next level. So some folks to add on to the team, and some economics to put around that deposit there, so that we can make an actual production decision and drive it towards that. So likely in the next 6 to 12 months, that's probably a scenario.
Great. All right, well, thank you. Howard is asking, is there a guess at inferred resources? If tested, how much gold have you recovered from the leachable ore?
As far as the inferred is not great, because we're not projecting very far on the inferred category. We look at these drill holes that are ending in mineralization and things that are below the pit. But so the inferred to inferred is probably quite a bit, but the actual measurement of inferred is pretty limited. The opportunity for expanding this resource is quite high. Most of the alteration in the deepest parts of the holes that have been drilled to date is still in strong alteration, strong illite, sericite, quartz. And you have a lot of it with a grade at depth. There's an interesting geological feature that is important to Tres Cruces, and that's its hydrothermal breccias. These hydrothermal breccias pick up fragments from the Cretaceous rocks underneath the tertiary rocks. These Cretaceous rocks are sandstones, and tell you that the mineralization in the system is going to the unconformity. As a corollary, one could look at Lagunas Norte. The 80% of the ore at Tres Cruces, or at Lagunas Norte, I should say, is hanging around the unconformity. Most of it is in the Cretaceous rocks, although the mineralization is tertiary in age. So the depth opportunity at Tres Cruces is quite good. So I think that's one of the big targets. And most of these low sulfidation systems do have bonanza grades at depth. And there's a few examples in the presentation. Hishikari is a good one, and there are others.
Great. All right, thank you. John is asking, is Peru still a mining-friendly jurisdiction?
I say it's still quite friendly. It's been friendly forever. I don't think it's likely to change. It's a major part of their economy. The experience that Barrick has had and other people have had in the area around Tres Cruces has been very positive. There's lots of folks are looking for work, so I wouldn't expect there's any issues there.
Great, yeah, thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. Victor is asking, is there enough water on site for heap leach?
Water is never a problem in rainy in the altitude of Peru. So no, there's plenty of water available. Power is the national grid is right there, so power and water shouldn't be an issue.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Wayne and Christina, for walking us through your presentation and taking us through the live Q&A. I also want to thank everyone who submitted questions. If you think of a question after the summit, we will be sending out a short survey, and the new Oroperu team will be happy to follow up with you directly. And of course, you can also find more information on their website. So with that, I'll just hand it back to Wayne and Christina for the final word.
Yeah, thanks a lot for hosting us, Dasha. You can contact us right there. Our emails are on the screen, and our contact numbers there as well. I'm happy to answer any questions and any follow-up questions you all may have after this. And thank you all for joining.